Hi guys, welcome to a video. As some of you may or may not know, I recently did an epic 40-minute review of the L Word on this channel. No one asked for it, but I provided anyway. And a couple of the comments on that video referred to the lack of diverse or authentic representation on the L Word. And I thought it would be really interesting to maybe unpack that and discuss it today. I do think these comments are completely valid, but I did also want to look at the bigger picture and also take into consideration the time in which the show was first released. And of course, this is just my take on it. If you don't like the show and you don't feel like the show represents you in any way, shape or form, that's completely valid. The show is not for everyone. So the L Word was really the first of its kind in the landscape of television. It was really the first show to ever portray and focus on the lives of lesbians. So therefore it had a lot riding on it, and in a lot of ways Showtime were really taking a risk making this kind of content back in 2004. Because when all is said and done, lesbian content that takes lesbianism seriously is pretty niche. It doesn't really have widespread appeal. You know, we live in a society which prioritizes heterosexuality, and really outside of the adult film industry and serving as a sexual curiosity or a sexual experiment for straight women, I don't think many people really pay the lesbian community that much mind. And therefore, business-wise, it can be a risky thing to invest in. And unfortunately, I think it's safe to say that the L Word had to tick certain boxes to gain a green light and get the show on air. It's been described as a Trojan horse in a lot of ways, because on the surface, the show does look palatable to a wider heteronormative audience, and it has an almost glamorous appeal to it. The characters are mostly feminine, all of them are gorgeous, but overall the cast essentially does adhere to Eurocentric patriarchal beauty standards, with the exception of Shane. And I haven't mentioned Kit because Kit isn't a lesbian character in the show, she's straight, so I won't be including her in this video. It is worth noting that the aspect of white privilege and white passing privilege is addressed in the show, so they're not completely ignorant of that. I also think it's worth mentioning that later on in the series, they do make an effort to include more Black, Indigenous, women of colour characters. So as far as the cast go appearance-wise, you could make the same argument about the cast of Friends or Sex and the City. Obviously, not all straight people look like the women in Sex and the City, and not all straight people look like the cast of Friends. You know, actors are definitely cast with a certain appeal in mind, and the same goes for lesbian media. Just as a side note, I'm absolutely not defending that the TV and the film industry works in this way. I don't support that at all. However, it is unfortunately a current and past reality that needs to be acknowledged. Eileen Shaken also put a mostly lesbian and queer cast together for the show. And whilst I've critiqued this show a lot, I do genuinely believe that the heart of the show is Eileen wanting to showcase lesbian lives and tell lesbian stories. And she had to make sure that the show would reach a wider market and a wider audience to get the green light on it in the first place. The TV industry is, and was especially back then, dominated by white men whose interests really lie with themselves. And as I said in my review, it's incredibly telling that the opening shot of the first episode of the L Word is of a white man, it's of Tim. You know, that's almost a commentary in itself. And the show goes on to provide several more commentaries about the state of women and lesbians existing within the TV and film industry. You know, we see this with the character of Mark and the whole lay girls thing. We're told that the female actors need to be seen as straight, they need to be seen as screwable, and if the women aren't sexually appealing to men, then what's the point? There's even a suggestion in Lay Girls that the main protagonist, who is a lesbian, in the end should just go back to a man. So as you can imagine, Lay Girls is quite obviously an echo of the L Word itself and what it was up against in real life. So on the surface, it might seem that the L Word is an overtly feminine, glamorous, depiction of lesbianism, which for some people isn't exactly relatable. These were tools to make it more marketable and more appealing to a wider heteronormative audience. But when we take a look at what the show is really about, it humanizes lesbians. It focuses on female relationships, female friendships, female sexuality. It gives us very fleshed out female characters, which extends beyond their appearance, and the show also portrays a lot of the hardships, especially back then, lesbians had to go through. You know, the fact that this show focuses on that many women outside of their relationships towards men is revolutionary in itself, let alone the fact we get to see Jennifer Beals in a suit kissing women. It's also worth mentioning the more intimate scenes between the women in the show and the way in which the characters engaged with each other sexually. You know, not once watching this show did I ever feel like I was watching two straight women who were there to pick up a paycheck, or like I was really watching something that was solely made to appease a male audience. A lot of those scenes were so profoundly intimate and true to life. You know, this is what happens when you have a lesbian creator and you know there's an authenticity in the L Word, and that really heavily goes in its favour representation wise. And both Bet and Shane were incredibly masculine characters. You will also find several Shanes in any lesbian bar you walk into. Oh, I know, because I've seen it with my own two eyes, and you can't really ask for any more authentic representation than what Shane offers. And as I've said, some of the cast were openly lesbian, so the show was lesbians portraying lesbians, created by a lesbian. I think there's at least a layer of authentic representation where the L Word is concerned. A positive side of the feminine representation in the L Word is that it redefines the two-dimensional stereotype that most people have about what a lesbian is and what a lesbian looks like. You know, when most people think about what a lesbian looks like, they're not really thinking of Alice, they're not really thinking of Bet, they're thinking more Big Boo from Orange is the New Black. You know, there have been times at work where I've dropped that I'm a lesbian into the conversation, and the response has often been that I'm either joking about it or lying because I don't look a certain way. And in a way, the L Word seeks to redefine the lesbian stereotype and gives us a new way of looking at lesbians. Overall, the show has always had a lot to live up to. It was created in a time where lesbian content was very thin on the ground, and what we did have wasn't necessarily that great. You know, and lesbians are not a monolith, we're not a homogenous group, and the L Word was never going to be able to appeal to everybody, it was never going to be able to tick every box. But when all is said and done, I think Eileen Shaken really created something that changed the landscape of lesbians on television forever. And the show was completely unapologetic and groundbreaking. And most of all, thank you for, you know, casting Jennifer Beals as a lesbian. I personally think that makes up for, you know, everything else. But that's just my opinion. Okay guys, if you've got any thoughts surrounding lesbian representation in the L Word, please let me know in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.